A lot of people worry about back safety during deadlifting, but they don't worry about it so much during a squat, which is funny because in my experience, competing in powerlifting for a decade and working specifically with people with back pain for the last couple of years, I see more issues coming from squatting than from deadlifting. And this probably surprises people because if we think about deadlifting from a mechanical perspective, we've got more torque through the spine, we're dealing with heavier loads, we've got worse leverage because the bar's out in front of us. So why would it be that a squat potentially causes more issues than a deadlift? Well, it's down to the biomechanical features associated with that movement. And in this video, I'm going to go through what they are and also use that as a representation of why I think that the squat is a poor template for high intensity human movement from an athletic perspective. As we get into the deep flexion positions of a squat, there are a few things that happen that bias us away from maintaining optimum tightness and producing high degrees of force. So to produce tension with our muscles, we need to create overlaps and cross-bridging within the muscle fibers. And when we go below 90 degrees, that overlap reduces and we lose tension. And we can feel this. So when we're at 90 degrees, we can feel really, really stiff and strong. And as we go below that, we're going to drop tension and we have to be very conscious of trying to maintain tightness. A similar thing happens with our joints. So as we reach 90 degrees, our joints are maximally compressed. And then when we go below that, the joint space starts to open up again. Now we might think of compression or associate compression with being a bad thing, but when we're trying to produce force and be explosive, we need that compression within our joints. For example, when I'm running and my foot strikes the ground, all of the joints on this side of my body are going to internally rotate, they're going to compress, and that's going to allow me to produce force and propel myself forward. In a squat, we're going to go below 90 degrees and open up joint space, and this reintroduces slack to the system and basically creates an incoherent situation for us to try and work against a significant amount of resistance. As a result of this, there's going to be a couple of isolated areas that are going to have to essentially hyper-compress to make up for the lack of tension elsewhere, and often we're going to see this happen at the lower back. Now, the final thing that I want you to consider is our connective tissue, our fascia. Now, this is a tissue that wraps around all of our bones, muscles, and organs, and it is what our ligaments and tendons are made of, and it connects in lines across my entire body from head to toe. It runs up the sides, the front, and the back, and it also wraps around in spirals. And what this allows is a phenomenon called tensegrity, where the interacting lines of fascia produce tension against each other that provides suspension and elastic potential when I'm trying to move through space. So as I lean off to one side, the stretch on here is going to produce tension and is going to help pull me back to the center. And if you imagine that rubber bands are wrapped around my body in a spiral, as I reach into rotation, that's going to allow me with free elastic recoil to turn and again to move through space and to be athletic. When I squat down into a deep position, all of these lines of fascia are just put on slack. So this means that we lose tensegrity, we are losing the suspension of that tissue. So we've got muscles, joints, and connective tissue all biasing us towards a relaxed situation rather than a high threshold force producing situation. And this is why we can be strong when we deadlift. We're not going below 90 degrees in any single joint typically. And we've got our posterior chain on a stretch, on tension, that helps us maintain tightness. This is a lot of justification from a technical standpoint of something that we should know intuitively, that the squat is not a high threshold activity within the library of human movement. It is fundamentally a resting position, and this is why our body behaves this way and why it biases us against high intensity performance at the bottom of a squat.